Alright, original tales for a story for you. In this one, it gets messy fast. Let's get into it.
My wealthy grandmother saw me and my 6-year-old daughter at a family shelter. She asked, "Why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" I was stunned. What house? 3 days later, I arrived at a family event, and my parents went pale. If you've never tried to get a 6-year-old ready for school while living in a family shelter, I can summarize the experience for you. It's like running a small airport. Except the passengers are emotional, the security line is shame, and you're doing it all with one sock missing. That morning, Lila's sock was the one missing. "Mom," she whispered, the way kids do when they're trying to help you not fall apart. "It's okay. I can wear different socks." She held up one pink sock with a unicorn and one white sock that used to be white. I stared at them like they were evidence in a crime scene. "It's a bold fashion choice," I said. I do what I want." Lila smiled, and just like that, for half a second, I forgot where we were. Then the shelter door opened behind us and the cold slapped me back into reality. We were outside St. Bridget Family Shelter, 6:12 a.m., the sky still a bruised gray. The sidewalk was damp. The air had that winter smell, metallic and clean, like the world had been scrubbed too hard. Lila adjusted her backpack, which was bigger than she was. I tugged the zipper up on her puffy coat and tried not to look at the sign above the entrance. Family shelter. It wasn't even the word shelter that got me. It was the word family. Like we were a category, like we were a label on a box. "Okay," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "School bus in 5 minutes." Lila nodded. She was brave in a quiet way that made me feel both proud and guilty at the same time. Then she asked softly, "Do I still have to say my address when Mrs. Cole asks?" My stomach clenched. "I don't think she'll ask today," I said. Lila didn't push. She just looked down at her shoes and then back up at me like she was memorizing my face, like she was checking if I was still me. "Mom," she said, "are we going to move again?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. And that's when a black sedan slid to the curb like it belonged there. Not a taxi, not an Uber, not the kind of car that ever pulled up to St. Bridget unless it took a wrong turn and regretted it. The door opened, and a woman stepped out in a tailored coat the color of midnight. Evelyn Hart, my grandmother. I hadn't seen her in over a year. I knew that because my life had been measured in before everything fell apart, and after. And she belonged firmly in before. She looked exactly the way she always did, composed, elegant, and slightly terrifying. Not in a cruel way, in an "I once ended a boardroom argument by raising one eyebrow" way. Her gaze landed on me first, and I saw recognition, then confusion. Then it landed on Lila. Something changed in her face, something quick and sharp, like a crack in glass. She looked up at the sign above the entrance, and then she looked back at me. "Maya," she said, and my name sounded strange in her voice, like she hadn't said it out loud in a long time. "What are you doing here?" My first instinct was to lie, not because I thought she'd judge me, because I couldn't stand being seen. "I'm fine," I said, which is the default lie of exhausted women everywhere. "We're okay. It's temporary." Evelyn's eyes flicked down to Lila's mismatched socks, and then to my hands, red and dry from too much sanitizer, too much cold, too much life. Her voice went quieter. "Maya," she said again, "why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" The world tilted. I blinked at her. "My... what?" She didn't repeat herself like she thought I was stupid. She repeated herself like she thought I might faint. "The house," she said, enunciating the words. "On Hawthorne Street." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What house?" I heard myself say. I don't have a house. Evelyn stared at me as if I'd spoken in another language. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was running numbers in her head. Timelines. Possibilities. Lies. Lila tugged my sleeve. Mom, she whispered. Do we have a house? I looked down at her. Her eyes were wide, hopeful in a way that hurt. I swallowed. No, honey, I said gently. We don't. Evelyn's face went very still, and when my grandmother went still, it usually meant something was about to break. She stepped closer, not to me, toward Lila. She crouched down in front of her, which was almost shocking. Evelyn Hart did not crouch for anyone. She sat in chairs that cost more than my monthly income and made everyone else adjust. But there she was, lowering herself to my daughter's height. You're Lila, right? She asked. Yes, Lila whispered shyly. Evelyn's expression softened just slightly. That's a beautiful name. Then her eyes lifted to mine and turned sharp again. Get in the car, she said. I blinked. Grandma, get in the car, she repeated, and there was no room in her tone for negotiation. I felt heat rush to my face. Anger, embarrassment, relief, everything tangled up. Evelyn opened the back door of the sedan. I hesitated. Lila looked up at me. Mom, she said, small and steady. It's okay. And the fact that my 6-year-old was comforting me was the final straw. I nodded. Okay. Lila climbed into the back seat first, clutching her backpack, and I slid in beside her, still half expecting someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me this was a misunderstanding. As soon as the door shut, the silence inside felt expensive. Evelyn didn't drive immediately. She just sat there with both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Then she spoke, very calmly. By tonight, she said, I will know who did this. My stomach flipped. She turned her head to look at me. I swallowed hard. Grandma, I don't understand. No, she said, you don't. And that tells me everything. She pulled out her phone, tapped once, and said, Call Adam. A man answered quickly. Ms. Hart. This is Evelyn, she said. Get the property manager for Hawthorne Street on the line. And I want a simple answer. Who has the keys, who is living there, and whether anyone has been collecting money off it. My blood ran cold. Money? I stared at her profile, at the set of her jaw, at the calm way she said those words like she was ordering coffee. And I realized I was not just embarrassed. I was standing on the edge of something much darker. If you'd asked me 6 months earlier if I thought I'd ever be living in a shelter with my daughter, I would have laughed. Not because I thought it couldn't happen, because I thought it couldn't happen to me. That's a dangerous kind of arrogance, by the way. It doesn't protect you. It just makes the fall louder. 6 months earlier, I was still working as a nursing assistant at St. Jude's Medical Center. 12-hour shifts, call lights going off like a slot machine, people asking me for things I didn't have. Time, answers, miracles. I was exhausted, but I was surviving. And then I moved in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary. It always starts with temporary. My dad, Robert, had that calm, reasonable voice that people believe. My mom, Diane, had that soft smile that made her sound like she was doing you a favor, even when she was cutting you off at the knees. These days, I call them by their first names. Mom and Dad didn't fit anymore. You can stay with us until you get back on your feet, Diane said. Lila needs stability. Family supports family. I should have heard the fine print hiding in that sentence, but I didn't. At first, it was tolerable. My parents' apartment was small, but we made it work. Lila slept in my old room. I worked, I paid what I could, I kept my head down. Then the comments started. Not big, obvious attacks. Little ones. The kind that don't look like cruelty if you tell someone about them later. "You're always tired," Diane would say. "Maybe you should organize your life better." Robert would sigh when Lila's toys were on the floor. "We're just trying to keep the place nice." And then, one night, after I'd come home from a double shift with my feet aching and my brain half dead, Diane sat down at the kitchen table like she was about to deliver a diagnosis. "We need to talk," she said. I already knew that tone. "We think it's time you became independent," she said softly. "You've been here long enough." "I'm trying," I said, keeping my voice even. "Rents are high. Deposits—" "You're a mother," Diane said. "If you're a good mother, you'll figure it out." The words hit me so hard I actually looked around, like someone else must have said them. Robert cleared his throat. 30 days. That's reasonable. We're not monsters." I wanted to scream, but screaming never helped in that apartment. It just gave them something to point at later. So I nodded. "Okay." And I tried. I looked at listings during my breaks at the hospital, my thumbs scrolling while I gulped cafeteria coffee. I called places. I got told the same thing over and over. First and last month. Deposit. Proof of income. Credit check. Sorry, we chose another applicant. Every day I felt like I was running uphill with Lila on my back. And then came the night they decided 30 days was actually a suggestion. It was after a late shift. I'd helped a confused elderly man back into bed 3 times, cleaned up a spilled tray, and held a woman's hand while she cried because she was scared of surgery. I came home after midnight. The hallway light outside my parents' apartment was on. My stomach tightened immediately. 2 cardboard boxes sat outside the door. My boxes. I stared at them for a long second like my brain refused to accept the shape of what I was seeing. Then I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again. Harder. Finally, the door cracked open. Diane's face appeared, calm as if this was a normal Tuesday. "You need to keep your voice down," she whispered sharply. "Neighbors." "Why are my things outside?" I demanded. Robert's voice came from behind her, bored. "We told you, Maya. Independence." "It hasn't been 30 days, I said, my voice shaking. Diane's expression hardened just slightly. "Plans change." I glanced past her shoulder into the entryway. Lila was curled up on the floor right by the shoe rack, her little jacket folded under her head like a pillow, half asleep, shoes still on, like they'd put her there hours ago so I could scoop her up and disappear without waking the whole apartment. "Where are we supposed to go?" I hissed. Diane's smile came back, thin and satisfied. "You'll figure it out. You always do." And then, as if she were doing me a favor, she added, "Don't make a scene." I stood there with my boxes in the hallway, the air buzzing in my ears. I stepped inside just long enough to crouch and slide my arms under Lila. She made a tiny sleepy sound and automatically wrapped herself around my neck. As I backed out into the hall, Diane's hand was already on the door. The door closed. Lila stirred. "Mom?" she mumbled. "It's okay," I lied automatically. We're having a sleepover." I shoved the boxes into my car and drove. I don't remember most of that night. I remember streetlights. I remember the way my hands shook on the steering wheel. I remember sitting in the car with Lila asleep across the back seat, her small body curled like a question mark. I remember thinking over and over, how did this happen? The next day, I tried to fix it. Because that's what I do. I fix things. I wipe down messes. I lift people who can't lift themselves. I called Diane. She didn't answer. I called Robert. He answered once. "We're doing this because we love you," he said, like he was reading from a script. "Tough love." Then he hung up. I went to work anyway, because the rent I didn't have wasn't going to pay itself. By day 3, my cheeks were hollow from stress and my stomach hurt from cheap gas station food. I tried a motel. 1 night. 2. Then the money ran out. A school counselor noticed Lila was quiet, asked if everything was okay. I lied. Then the counselor asked again, gently, and I saw Lila watching me with those big eyes, learning from me how to lie to survive. So I told the truth. And 2 days later, I was filling out shelter intake forms while Lila sat beside me swinging her legs. The intake worker was kind but tired, like she'd seen too much. "We need your information," she said. "We need to know where you stayed last night." "In my car," I said. She nodded like she was checking a box. Lila leaned toward me and whispered too loudly, "Is this our house now?" The woman flinched. I smiled too hard. "No," I said quickly. "No, sweetheart." I wanted to add, "This is temporary," but the word tasted like a joke. That night, Lila fell asleep on a narrow bed beside me in a room that smelled like bleach and overcooked food. I lay awake listening to the sounds of other families behind thin walls, coughing, babies crying, someone whispering, "It's okay," over and over like a prayer. My phone sat in my hand. I thought about calling my grandmother. Evelyn Hart was not the kind of woman you called to cry. She was the kind of woman you called when you needed a problem solved. But my mother had spent years training me not to bother her. "Your grandmother hates drama," Diane always said. "She doesn't like weakness. Don't embarrass yourself." And when I texted Diane after the lockout, asking if Evelyn knew what was happening, Diane responded instantly. "Grandma is overseas. She's busy. Don't drag her into this." It was incredible how fast my mother could answer a text when she wanted something. So I didn't call. I told myself I'd handle it. I told myself I didn't want to look pathetic. I told myself a lot of things. And then, on a cold winter morning, my grandmother stepped out of a black sedan outside a shelter and asked me why I wasn't living in my house on Hawthorne Street. And I realized I didn't just have a housing problem. I had a family problem, and someone had been lying for a long time. Back in the sedan, Evelyn's call was already in progress. I didn't hear the other voice, only Evelyn's side, sharp enough to cut glass. "Who signed for the keys?" A beat. "And the house is occupied." My stomach dropped. Evelyn didn't react like someone surprised. She reacted like someone confirming what she'd already suspected. "Send the file to Adam," she said. "Everything." She ended the call and finally looked at me, not with pity, with certainty. I sent one text to Lila's school with thumbs that wouldn't stop shaking. "Family emergency. Lila won't be in today. No explanation, no essay. Just the truth in the smallest, least humiliating package I could manage." Evelyn drove to a diner 10 minutes away, the kind of place with warm windows, a bell on the door, and menus that smelled like syrup. Inside, the heater blasted my face so hard I almost cried from the shock of being warm. We slid into a booth. Lila immediately found the kids' menu and started coloring a cartoon pancake like it had personally insulted her. Evelyn ordered hot chocolate for Lila without asking. I watched her do it and felt a weird wave of anger. Not at Evelyn, at the universe, because it was that easy to be kind, and my parents had chosen everything else. Evelyn lifted her phone again. "Grandma," I started, then stopped, because I had no idea what I was even asking. "What house? Why are you here? How did my life become a shelter sign?" Evelyn didn't answer my questions in the order my panic wanted. She just said calmly, "I'm going to make another call. You'll listen, and you won't interrupt." I nodded. It was the kind of nod you give a surgeon when you're on the operating table. She tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. 1 ring. 2. Then my mother's voice. Diane. Bright and sweet, like she was auditioning for the role of loving parent in a community theater production. Evelyn! Oh my goodness! What a surprise! How are you? Evelyn's tone stayed pleasant, almost gentle. I was thinking about Maya, she said. How is she doing? I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. There was a microsecond of silence, the tiniest pause where a liar decides which version of reality is most useful. Then Diane answered smoothly, confidently, like she'd been practicing the sentence in front of a mirror. Oh, she's doing great, she said. She's living in the house. She's settled. She loves it. You know Maya. She wanted space, so we didn't bother you. I stared at the sticky table as if it might open up and swallow me whole. Across from me, Lila colored quietly, humming to herself. She didn't understand the words, but she understood tone. She glanced up once, saw my face, and went right back to coloring harder. Like she could scribble the problem away. Diane kept talking, filling the silence with cheerful nonsense. How busy she'd been, how proud she was, how family is everything. Evelyn let her. Evelyn didn't rush liars. She gave them room to hang themselves properly. Finally, Evelyn said, "That's good to hear," and ended the call. Just like that. No confrontation, no accusation, no gotcha. My throat tightened. That, Evelyn said quietly, wasn't confusion. I let out a laugh that sounded like a cough. So she knew, I said. She knew the whole time. Evelyn's eyes stayed on mine, steady and sharp. She knew enough to lie without thinking, she said. That tells me what I need to know. Lila slid her coloring page toward me. Mom, look. I made the pancake purple. I forced a smile so quickly it probably looked painful. Wow, I said. That pancake is incredibly brave. Lila giggled, and for half a second my chest unclenched. Then Evelyn leaned in, lowered her voice, and said the simple sentence I should have heard months ago. I arranged a house for you, she said, on Hawthorne Street. Your parents were supposed to manage the handoff. Keys, move in, all of it. They told me it was done. My brain tried to process it. A house. For us. And my parents had been living their lives like that sentence didn't exist. I gripped the edge of the booth until my knuckles went white. Why wouldn't you tell me directly? I heard myself ask, and immediately felt stupid, like I was blaming the only person who'd shown up. Evelyn didn't flinch. Because I trusted your parents, she said, which was my mistake. Not yours. Then she stood up, walked a few steps away so Lila couldn't hear, and made 2 quick calls. Low voice, clipped, efficient. I only caught pieces. Hawthorne file. Clean summary. Key log. Listing history. Tenant payments? Yes. Today. When she came back, she didn't sit down like she planned to linger. She sat down like she planned to move. You're not going back to that shelter, she said. My pride tried to stand up and argue. My exhaustion shoved it back down. Okay, I whispered, which was the most honest word I'd said all day. An hour later, Lila was bouncing on a hotel bed like it was a trampoline, and the world had never been cruel. She found the little complimentary soap, sniffed it dramatically, and announced it smelled like a fancy grandma. Evelyn stood by the window, phone in hand, watching traffic like she was watching a battlefield. She didn't tell me everything. She didn't have to. The point wasn't details yet. The point was that something was happening. Something I didn't have to carry alone. That night, after Lila fell asleep in clean sheets with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Evelyn sat at the small table by the window and finally spoke again. Your parents are hosting an event, she said. Important to them. A venue, relatives, speeches, the whole performance. My stomach tightened. When? Evelyn's gaze stayed on the city lights. Soon, she said. And we'll be there. She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a decision already made. 3 days later, I stood in the hotel bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a version of me that had been put through a washer cycle and hung up to dry in a storm. Evelyn had insisted I buy a dress. Not an expensive one. Just a clean one. A simple one. You don't need armor, she'd said. You need dignity. I wasn't sure dignity came in polyester, but I appreciated the sentiment. Lila wore a little blue dress and tights. She twirled once in the hotel room and said, I look like a princess. You do, I said, and my throat tightened. On the ride over, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might vomit. What if I freeze? I asked quietly. Evelyn didn't look at me. Then I'll speak. What if they deny everything? They will, Evelyn said. What if everyone thinks I'm... I stopped, because I didn't even have a word for it. Evelyn glanced at me then, her gaze sharp but steady. Maya, she said, you've survived worse than a room full of liars. The car pulled up outside a venue I'd never have picked in my life. One of those hotel event spaces with soft lighting and hard smiles. The sign by the entrance read, Hart Collins Family Dinner. Of course it did. My mother loved an event. Not because she liked people, because she liked witnesses. Inside, there were relatives I hadn't seen in months. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people with opinions and casseroles. Except the casseroles had been replaced by catered hors d'oeuvres served on trays like tiny edible bribes. At the far end of the room, there was a projector screen set up and a microphone. Because my mother couldn't serve dinner without also serving a narrative. Before we went in, Evelyn stopped at a side door and spoke briefly to a staff member. A woman nodded and opened a small private room next to the banquet hall. Quiet, warm, stocked with water bottles and crackers. This is for Lila, Evelyn said. She doesn't need to be in the center of this. Lila took one cautious step into the room, then looked up at Evelyn seriously. Do I get snacks? Yes, Evelyn said. Good ones. Lila accepted that like it was legally binding. A trusted assistant stayed with her. Lila waved at me, completely unaware she was being protected from the family apocalypse. Then Evelyn looked at me. You go in first, she said. I knew what she was doing. Let them see me before they saw her. Let them panic in silence. I walked into the banquet room alone. The chatter softened, then resumed, the way people do when they sense something but don't want to be the first to acknowledge it. Then Diane saw me. Her smile appeared automatically, then glitched, like a bad Wi-Fi connection. Her eyes flicked over my dress, my posture, the fact that I wasn't wearing I'm drowning on my face anymore. Her hands tightened slightly around her wine glass. Robert noticed a second later. His laugh died halfway through. His jaw clenched like he was biting down on a thought. Neither of them moved toward me. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't ask how Lila was. They did what people do when they're trying to calculate danger. They smiled and waited. I stood near the edge of the room and let the silence do its work. Dry humor is sometimes the only thing that keeps you from screaming, so I let myself have one thought. Look at us. A family dinner. The kind where everyone pretends the most important thing is the seating arrangement. A minute later, the room temperature changed. Evelyn Hart entered. Calm. Unhurried. Completely in control. Beside her was a man with a slim folder and a laptop bag, the kind of person who looked like he'd never raised his voice in his life because he didn't need to. Diane went pale. Not, oh, you surprised me, pale. More like, I just realized my entire plan has a hole in it, pale. Robert straightened his shoulders, the way he did when he wanted to look like the victim before anyone had accused him of anything. Evelyn nodded to a few relatives like she was simply attending dinner. Then she looked at my mother. "Diane," Evelyn said lightly, "before we eat, I'd like to clear up something you told me." My mother's smile tightened. "Of course, Mom." Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "You told me Maya was living in the house on Hawthorne Street," she said. The room quieted, not because everyone suddenly cared about Hawthorne Street, but because everyone suddenly cared about Diane's face. Diane's eyes darted. She set her glass down as if it had become heavy. "Well," she said, laughing too fast. "Yes, she—" Evelyn held up a hand. "Let's not do this with guessing," Evelyn said. "Let's do it with facts." She nodded to the man with the laptop. He stepped forward and plugged into the venue's projector like he'd done it 1,000 times. The first slide appeared, Hawthorne Street. Summary. A murmur ran through the room. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Evelyn didn't speak like she was giving a courtroom speech. She spoke like she was reading the weather. "This house was arranged for Maya and Lila," she said, and the screen showed a simple line to match. Next slide. "Keys released to Diane Hart Collins. July." Evelyn let that sit for half a second. Then another slide. A listing screenshot. The Hawthorne house marketed as a furnished rental. Photos of the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. People leaned forward. Diane's hands started to shake. Next, a lease summary. Names blurred, dates visible. Tenants moved in, August. And then the slide that made the room go dead quiet. A payment instruction page from the property manager file. Rent payout account, provided by Diane and Robert. Evelyn's voice didn't rise. "Diane," she said, "you didn't just take the keys." She looked around the room, making sure everyone heard. "You rented out the home meant for my granddaughter and my great-granddaughter, and you had the rent sent to an account you controlled." Robert snapped first, loud, trying to take back the room. "This is inappropriate," he barked. "This is a family event." Evelyn turned her gaze to him. "Yes," she said. "That's why I'm doing it here." Diane found her voice, thin and frantic. "We were going to tell her," she said quickly. "It was temporary. We needed—" "Temporary," Evelyn repeated. Her eyes flicked toward the side room where Lila was, unseen but present. "You displaced a child," Evelyn said, and the room went still. She paused, just long enough, then finished the sentence. "For profit." Someone gasped. Someone whispered, "You've got to be kidding." Diane started crying, real tears this time. "We had debts," she sobbed. "You don't understand." Evelyn's expression didn't change. "I understand enough," she said. "And I'm done funding your choices." She turned slightly so everyone could hear and said simply, "Starting now, Diane and Robert receive nothing from me. No more help. No more transfers. No inheritance." Robert's face twisted. "You can't—" "I can," Evelyn said. "And I already did." The man with the folder stepped forward, calm. "Diane Collins, Robert Collins," he said politely. "These documents are for you." A uniformed officer stood nearby, not dramatic, not aggressive, just present, because Evelyn didn't gamble with scenes like this. Diane stared at the papers like they were radioactive. Robert took them with shaking hands, then looked around the room and finally understood the worst part. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reputation collapsing in public. Evelyn's voice stayed level. "You will not contact Maya," she said. "You will cooperate, and you will answer for what you did." Diane turned to me then, eyes wild. "Maya," she begged. "Tell her to stop. We're family." Something inside me went cold and clear. "You should have remembered that," I said quietly, "before you made a business out of my daughter's home." Diane's face crumpled. I didn't feel joy exactly. I felt relief. Relief that the truth was finally out loud. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that Lila would never have to learn how to smile through humiliation the way I had. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I walked out of the banquet room, down the hallway, and opened the door to the private room. Lila looked up, cheeks full of crackers. "Mom, are we done?" I crouched and hugged her so tight she squeaked. "Yeah," I whispered. "We're done." She leaned back and looked at my face carefully, like she was checking for storms. Then she asked softly, "Can we go home?" I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said. "We can." Evelyn met us in the hallway. She didn't look back at the room. She didn't need to. In the car, Lila leaned against my shoulder and fell asleep. I stared out the window, hands trembling. "Grandma," I whispered, "what happens now?" Evelyn didn't take her eyes off the road. "Now," she said, "we take back what was meant for you. 6 months later, our life is boring in the best way. We live on Hawthorne Street now. Lila has her own room, her own curtains, and a crooked art gallery of drawings taped to the wall. She walks to school like the world has always been safe. That's the point. I'm still a nursing assistant. By choice, not because I'm stuck. I'm finishing my RN track one step at a time, and for the first time, my energy goes into the future instead of survival. Evelyn never paid for my life. She showed up when it mattered most, and she made sure no one could ever intercept help again. Sunday mornings, she visits with pastries and pretends she's only here to see Lila. Lila doesn't buy it. "Grandma Evelyn," she'll ask, "do you like our house?" Evelyn always pauses like she's swallowing something heavy. Then she says, "Yes, I do." As for Diane and Robert, turns out you can't rent out someone else's home, collect the money, and keep calling it family. The rent they took didn't stay free. They were forced to repay it, and the investigation that followed made their respectable image evaporate. Once Evelyn cut them off, their hidden debts showed up like roaches under a flipped light switch. People stopped inviting them. Calls stopped getting answered. My mother tried to contact me. Not to apologize, to negotiate. I blocked the number, because I'm done bargaining for basic decency. So what do you think? Did Evelyn do the right thing, or did she go too far? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.